Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Friday, September 13th. If you are just tuning in, we've just gone over the Dolphins' loss on Thursday Night Football to the Buffalo Bills, 31-10, as well as the situation surrounding their star quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa, and if he will retire or not. In this segment, we're going to get our crystal ball out, do some prognostication, some predictions, talk about the NFL schedule for this weekend. All 14 games taking place on Sunday, we're going to go over. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday, September 13th. But like I was saying, we're going to get back into the NFL Week 2 predictions. Starting off with a game I will be attending this Sunday. The New York Giants travel down to Washington, D.C. to take on the Washington Commanders, the home opener for one Jaden Daniels. Should be a lot of fun this game. Daniel Jones, for as bad as he's looked his whole career, his most recent games, his last 6 or 7 games, he's always been very good against the Commanders. 10 touchdowns to 3 interceptions in his career against the Commanders. It's the one team that he's consistently played well against. This is a big bounce-back game for both of these teams, the Giants especially. The Giants are being looked at, along with the Panthers, as the basement, the laughingstock of the league in the NFL. This one should be a desperation-style game. Washington's secondary, their defense, already wasn't the best. Now they're down one of their top corners in Emmanuel Forbes, who, while he wasn't the greatest option, was still a starter on that team. There's a reason he was starting on that team, and it's not because of his name value there. The Giants come into Washington, and Malik Neighbors should tear this game open. This is still going to be a tight game. Washington is currently favored by 1.5 points. I'm leaning towards Washington in their home opener for Jaden Daniels. That stadium should be packed, I would assume. I'm leaning towards Washington getting this win just because, you get that momentum from your rookie quarterback in its first game, and that Giants defense, that secondary, hasn't been able to stop much. Sam Darnold, which a near perfect game against them last week, not very confidence-inspiring. I have Washington winning 27-20 in their home opener. Next game up on the schedule, we have the Las Vegas Raiders traveling to Baltimore to take on Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. And this game, I think, is actually going to be kind of similar to last week's game for the Raiders. The Raiders played the other Harbaugh brother, Jim Harbaugh, in his opener as a coach for the Chargers, and they ran the ball down their throats. And I think if Baltimore is smart, that's the exact same thing that they'll do. Derrick Henry should get a whole bunch of carries. That was when they looked their best against the Chiefs, when they were running the ball with Derrick Henry effectively. That's not to say he needs to get 30 carries a game. That's not to say he needs to get, 5 touches a drive, but they need to have him out there as a threat because that offense works so much better when they're pulling the linebackers in for play action. So I have the Ravens winning this game pretty comfortably. Right now they're favored by just 9 points, but I think this is going to be a blowout. I have the Ravens winning 33-10 at home. The next game up on the docket, we go travel down to Florida for a matchup in Jacksonville. The Jacksonville Jaguars coming off of a disappointing comeback loss to the Miami Dolphins, who we just talked about in our last segment. They take on Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns. Deshaun Watson comes in off of just a terrible game. He's arguably the worst quarterback in the entire NFL right now. That offense for Cleveland isn't going to be able to get much done, although this isn't a great secondary in Jacksonville. That Cleveland defense should keep this close. That being said, I'm still leaning towards Jacksonville. Currently, they're favored by 3 points. I think this is one of those games that's going to come down to the wire, a last-second field goal. I have Jacksonville taking this one by a score of 16-14 over the Cleveland Browns. Next game up, we have the New York Jets and Aaron Rodgers looking to bounce back, taking on the Tennessee Titans in Nashville. This game should be interesting as well. We've talked a lot this week about how Kirk Cousins doesn't look like his mobility has been the same since that Achilles injury. Same thing for Aaron Rodgers. There were a couple plays on Monday Night Football where he didn't look like he had that same mobility. This is a very, very good Tennessee Titans defensive line. This is a very good Tennessee Titans defense. We saw them shut down a Bears offense that I think, while yes, Caleb Williams is a rookie, and yes, they still need time to get, their stuff together, that defense played a very large part in making Caleb Williams and the Bears offense basically a nothing unit last week. This is a very good Titans team, but I think this Jets team is better. This is going to be a tight game. It depends if Aaron Rodgers is able to get his wide receivers, get the running game going. The Bears were unable to do that. The Jets have a defense that I think is kind of comparable to the Bears. At least I assumed they'd be better, but after their performance against the Niners, especially on the run game, maybe the Titans can run wild against them. The Titans just need to commit less turnovers than last week. That being said, I'm taking the Jets. They're favored by 3.5 points here on the road. I don't think it'll be that close. I have the Jets winning this one comfortably, 23-14. Then we have Minnesota hosting the San Francisco 49ers, and breaking news coming out of that game, Christian McCaffrey officially out once again. Christian McCaffrey, who was a last-minute addition to the inactive list on Monday Night Football, we saw Jordan Mason come in and absolutely dominate that Jets defense. This is a Minnesota team that absolutely dominated the Giants. Sam Darnold looked nearly perfect. I don't think it's going to be like that when Minnesota goes up against a better defense. Andre says it looks like CMC is going to the IR. That's right. Kyle Shanahan was talking about that. He'd be set up to come back at the earliest week 5 or week 6 against the Kansas City Chiefs in a Super Bowl rematch. So maybe that's what they're waiting for, making sure he's the healthiest. They showed they were able to win games without him anyway against a very good against a very good defense in the Jets. Now, run defense was their weakest part of the defense, but it wasn't give up 147 yards bad. This is a very, very good Niners team, and Minnesota is coming off of a win against a Giants team that is almost the opposite of the 49ers right now. I don't think Minnesota is going to be able to do nearly the same kind of work. Their offensive line isn't going to be able to hold up, especially the interior of the offensive line. I'm giving San Francisco a win. They're currently favored by 5 points. I think the final score is going to be 30-17. San Francisco taking care of business in Minnesota. Place they lost last year too, so this isn't just going to be a cakewalk. Something to keep in mind there. Up next, we have an interesting game. I'm a little lower on the Chargers. They're favored by 5 points in Carolina. Carolina is a team that is the worst team in football right now. You can have discussions about whether the Giants are worse than them, but I think very clearly the Panthers are the worst team right now. Chargers are coming off a big win. I think they're being slightly overrated. I definitely am lower on them than a lot of other people are. I still don't think this game will be close. I don't think their offense is explosive enough to put up 47 points like the Saints did, because they're not going to have that deep passing attack as much. They didn't throw the ball that often. They're going to run the ball down the Panthers' throat, and especially without Derek Brown in the middle holding it up at that defensive tackle position, the Carolina Panthers are not going to have an answer for the Chargers. The Chargers dominated on the ground. The Saints had over 5 yards a carry from Alvin Kamara last week. He's not better than that Chargers run game. The Saints run game isn't better than the Chargers run game. They are going to absolutely dominate this one. I have the Chargers winning 28-7. Then we get into an interesting game. One that I've heard a lot of differing opinions on, a lot of ups and downs. Seattle heading to New England to take on the Patriots. The Patriots coming off the biggest upset win of the week in week 1, taking down the Cincinnati Bengals on the road. Just their defense did their job against a depleted Cincinnati wide receiver room, but still, they didn't let Joe Burrow or the run game get anything going against them, a team that was supposed to be one of the worst units in football all around. Now they get a Seattle team that's coming off of what I would say it was an up and down game against the Broncos. The first half wasn't very good. The offensive line play especially wasn't very good against the Broncos. They gave up 2 safeties in that game, which is a little bit unforgivable, honestly, but they really stepped it up in that second half. They don't have Kenny Walker, who's doubtful for this game. That's not to say that he's not going to play, but doubtful usually is a safe bet for not playing. That being said, this is a Seattle defense that I was really impressed by. They played really good against the Broncos. They need to rally to tackle more, but Bo Nix could not throw the ball on them further than 10 yards. It was only checkdowns, and maybe that's part of Bo Nix's game. I want to give some credit to the Seattle defense because I thought they did a very good job against a still kind of talented Broncos receiving core. You know, Cortland Sutton is no slouch. This is a team that still has some names to throw to on offense. Seattle, I think, is going to be able to do just fine on offense. Just because there's no Kenny Walker doesn't mean they can't run the ball. Zach Charbonnet is a guy that scored a touchdown last week. If he gets more touches, he can show that he's a good replacement level backup in the NFL. I have Seattle currently is favored by 3.5 points, winning 24-10. I know some people think New England plus points is one that is up for discussion, and I agree. That's up for discussion, but I don't think it's going to end up being that close. Then we get an interesting one. Heading into the 4 o'clock games, I believe. New Orleans is heading down to Dallas to take on the Cowboys, who are favored by 6 points. The Saints put up the most offense last week. 47 points on an absolute rout of the Carolina Panthers. Their defense looked unstoppable. Their offense looked unstoppable under new offensive coordinator. I don't think that's the team they are. I think there's definitely improvements offensively. Absolutely. I don't think they're a team that's going to have the best offense in the league. I don't think Derek Carr is a guy that's going to transform back to his 2016 form and throw 4 touchdowns and 300 yards a game. That's just not something I expect out of Derek Carr and that offense. That being said, I definitely think it's better. They also did all of that against the Panthers, and that can't be overstated. The Panthers' defense is abysmal. Abysmal. The worst. Now they go and take on arguably the best defense in the Dallas Cowboys, who shut down the Browns, which doesn't sound that impressive, but their offense put up 30 points against a vaunted Browns defense. That is scary for a Saints unit that, while their defense is solid, it's not Browns level solid. I'm giving Dallas a pretty comfortable win in this one. I'm still low on the Saints. I don't know how high other people are on them, but I am relatively low on them. I think in my power rankings, I had them somewhere around 20 this last week. But doesn't change it. I think Dallas still wins this one pretty comfortably. 31-20, Dallas victory. Then we get Tampa Bay at Detroit. This one might honestly be the game of the week. Tampa Bay coming off of a big win at home against Washington. Their offense was clicking on all cylinders, again, against a very bad secondary, but still clicking on all cylinders. That Tampa Bay offense did its thing. And Detroit, just with hard-nosed football against a really good opponent in the Rams, even though they lost Aaron Donald, it's still a very, very quality win. In overtime, they were able to just run the ball down the throats. David Montgomery did his thing. That run game is going to be scary to go up against. They do have to go up against Vita Vea, who might be one of the best run stoppers in the entire league, though. So, that being said, I think this game is going to be a barn burner honestly. I think it's going to be very similar to the one we saw on Sunday Night Football, with both of these teams going on their own runs, keeping it close most of the game. Defense is kind of dominating a good portion of it there in the middle. Detroit is currently favored by a touchdown and a half, so 7.5 points. I'm going to give this one to Detroit, but I think it's going to be a closer game than the spread entails. I give it 28-23 Detroit, with another tough victory, this time at home. Then we get an interesting one. Indianapolis favored by 2.5 points on the road heading up to Lambeau. And this one's interesting not because I think this will be particularly close, but because Jordan Love is still questionable for this game. And I might be crazy here, but I thought there was no shot he was playing in this one. There's still some whispers that he might. Maybe this is just posturing for the Green Bay Packers to, try and get him in there if they can, because they don't want to start Malik Willis. But I would be shocked if he played in this one. If he finds a way to go and he's the same guy, they probably win this game. With Malik Willis in the game, I have no faith in this offense. That Colts defense is good enough that if they key in on the run, they key in on all the Green Bay weapons, they should be able to, at a minimum, slow them down. And I don't trust Malik Willis with his accuracy. I think he holds the ball too long in the pocket. I don't think he's an NFL-level quarterback if he's out there. And I think Anthony Richardson could single-handedly beat this team. We saw their defense kind of look human against a very, very good Eagles offense. But still, they gave up a lot of points, a lot of yards. I need to see more out of that defense. I don't think that defense is going to be good enough to win games with Malik Willis at quarterback. I think the Colts win 26-6 in this one. Then we get another game that I think might be worthy of being called Game of the Week. The Arizona Cardinals host the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams are riddled with injuries, but this Cardinals defense is awful. This Cardinals defense is one of the worst in the league. They're still favored by 1 at home. This is going to be a barn burner. Lots and lots of offense. Just going up and down the field, kind of like the Cardinals game was last week. I think the Rams get the victory in this one as well. 34-28, a similar score with the Bills. Anthony asks, hypothetically, if you were the ownership, GM, and the head coach of the Dolphins, would you force Tua for his own good to retire? I wouldn't force him to retire. I would recommend him to retire. We talked a little bit about this in the first segment, but if I was his family, I would urge him to retire. I'm not going to be the one to make that decision for him. That's one he has to make, or a doctor has to make. If I'm the GM or a head coach of the Dolphins, I want him back, selfishly. Again, I think it's best that he retires. I think he probably will end up retiring, to be completely honest with you. But that's not the GM or coach's decision to make. And I think if they respect him, they'll let him make that decision on his own. They wouldn't force him to do it. And if they were going to force him to do one thing, it wouldn't be to retire, I don't think. But thank you for the question. Moving on to the last couple of games. Denver hosting Pittsburgh. This is a potential revenge game. Right now, Russell Wilson is listed as questionable. Doesn't seem like he's in line to start. Seems like they're going to run with Justin Fields again. The Steelers are favored by 2.5 points on this one. I need to see Bo Nix be able to complete a ball any length downfield. He's almost unable to do that, and that Steelers defense is much more formidable than that Seahawks defense. It's going to be a problem all day for the Steelers. I'm giving this one to the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Broncos won't be able to move the ball. Steelers win 20-10. Then we get a Super Bowl, an AFC playoff rematch from the last couple of seasons. Cincinnati heads to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs, who are favored by 6. And the Cincinnati Bengals always start slow. We should have known it. They just lost the biggest upset of the week to the New England Patriots last week. I don't think this team is much healthier. I don't think this team is going to magically be able to compete with the Kansas City Chiefs, who look like they were revving on all cylinders. That defense is not good enough to stop all the weapons that the Chiefs have. I think the Chiefs take this one pretty handily, 30-14. And this takes us to Sunday Night Football. The last one we'll be predicting until next week. where Caleb Williams and the Bears take their talents down to Houston for a Sunday night clash between them and CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans, who are currently favored by 6.5 points. The CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans are a much better team than the Titans are. That Bears defense is going to keep this one close, but unless that offense is able to do something, unless that offense is able to move the ball just a little bit, they're not going to be able to come out with this win. I don't think it's going to be a blowout, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be close. I think Houston pulls ahead at the end, winning 28-17. But let me know what you think of any of these games. Any of them you disagree with, I'll run through the list real quick one more time. Washington beats New York 27-24. Baltimore over the Raiders 33-10. Jacksonville taking down Cleveland 16-14. The Jets take care of business against Tennessee 23-14. The 49ers beat Minnesota 30-17. The Chargers dismantle the Panthers 28-7. Seattle does their job, beats New England on the road 24-10. Dallas stomps out the Saints 31-20. Detroit in a tight one 28-23 over Tampa. Indianapolis over Malik Willis and the Green Bay Packers, not very competitive, 26-6. The Rams beat the Arizona Cardinals in a barn burner 34-28. Pittsburgh defense dominates 20-10 over Denver. Cincinnati offense is not enough to keep up with the Kansas City attack. They lose 30-14. And finally, that Sunday night game, Houston and CJ Stroud, just too much for the Bears, win 28-17. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're not done with predictions. We still have to take on that college football slate. There's a couple of big games today, a couple of big games tomorrow. We'll talk about, I think I have 11 on the list I wanted to cover. We'll talk about those, and any other games you want me to talk about, you can throw it in the comments. We'll break all those down coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.